By 7 o'clock last night, the waiting was over. As State Protection Group police crept into place, a window of the house was smashed, an unidentified object thrown inside.
On June 2nd, 1999, after a 32-hour standoff with police, Lebanese-Australian Michael Kanaan and the core group of his Sydney drug operation were arrested on a charge of conspiring to supply a commercial quantity of cocaine. While in custody, two of those men, known in court as Alan Rossini and Peter Laycock, actively cooperated with police in criminal proceedings against Michael Kanaan as the principal offender. The details painted a graphic picture of Kanaan's involvement in organised crime, and in particular, his deadly shooting spree in the second half of 1998.
Michael Kanaan was he was a surprise. He wasn't a person from a lower socio-economic group. He was from a loving family. He was quite intelligent.
Michael Kanaan is born on May 23rd, 1975. He attends various private schools, including Christian Brothers College, and has a stable, positive and religious upbringing.
The New South Wales HSC score, High School Certificate score that he got was what they call a TER of 80. It would have qualified him to, to do law or any upper level university course, but he was certainly of above average intelligence, and unfortunately he just didn't use that for the greater good.
Kanaan wants to join the federal police, but is ineligible due to an earlier conviction for assault. And so he embarks on a career in the IT industry instead. In 1997, however, Michael Kanaan becomes a member of a multicultural but predominantly Middle Eastern gang known as DK's Boys, which is formed and is controlled by the ruthless Danny Karam.
The reality was Danny Karam was a career criminal, had migrated to Australia from Lebanon, had a lengthy criminal history, was a man who was violent by nature, had a very quick temper, and was feared as not only a drug dealer but a standover man in the King's Cross area.
Did his schooling in Dulwich Hill, and then he did an apprenticeship, went to work, and then he got involved in crime, car theft and drugs, drug taking, drug dealing, possession of firearms. He got himself arrested, did some stints in prison, and then he decided, instead of being reformed, as some young people are after their first experience of jail, he went deeper into it.
Danny Karam was, he was a big man. He was powerfully built. He had a presence certainly on the streets of King's Cross. He had a reputation for violence. He was of Christian Lebanese background. He was involved in the civil war in Lebanon, so he was exposed to combat over there. So violence was nothing new to Danny.
So it was really a case of reputation. It was a case of, you've seen this movie, what was it, The Sting, where your reputation in the underworld is everything. So if you offend someone who is heavy, then you'll get it. And Danny Karam wanted to establish a reputation. Once he said something was to happen, if it didn't happen, his boys would come after you.
Karam's principal activity is the distribution and sale of cocaine. His organisation has a number of tiers, which includes Michael Kanaan as the second in charge, a handful of lieutenants and lower-level players such as street runners.
These Lebanese youngsters got together and decided to try to take over the drug trade. And in more recent times, there's evidence that they've been trying to take over the bikie gangs. But in those years, it was the drug trade in King's Cross was seen to be wide open for a takeover by this ethnic group.
It was a significant drug dealing operation. From an ounce of cocaine, the syndicate would in fact double its money over a period of 1 or 2 days, because that's the rate at which the sale of cocaine was at that time in King's Cross. So $4,000 would be turned into $8,000 in a matter of days.
Around the mid-90s was when we saw that step up more towards cocaine. Prior to that, myself as a police officer, I'd never really come across cocaine much at all. The main problem drug we had was heroin, but there was a significant amount of cocaine that was hitting the streets, and it was quite profitable.
Danny Karam gives his lieutenants, including Michael Kanaan, a gold ring. It features a tiger's head with ruby eyes and a diamond in its mouth.
Danny demanded loyalty from his group. If there was no loyalty, there was no membership in the group. Danny had rings that he had made with the letter D that he handed out to key players in the group. But such was Danny's way that they even had to pay for those rings at $900 each.
Although Karam lived in the eastern suburbs, he kept his lieutenants at a distance, communicating with them by mobile phone or visits. The group operated from a number of safe houses, which were premises rented under fictitious names, and they would use that as a base from which to go out and commit their criminal activities, either by using the safe house to store and cut drugs, and also to store and take weapons from.
Danny's boys were quite conscious of electronic surveillance. They wouldn't keep their mobile phones for too long, and after a week or two they would dump a mobile phone, connect a new one. So it was a task for us to keep abreast of them in relation to what mobile phone numbers they were using, because the mobile phones were the key to us to understanding what they were doing on a day-to-day basis with the drugs.
The operation is making $30,000 a week, but there are times when Kanaan and Rossini are paid modestly by comparison. By May 1998, Kanaan's resentment towards Karam is building, and he considers killing him. He's encouraged to do so by many others who believe he's made a fortune for his boss, but he's collected very little for it.
Michael Kanaan had a real problem that he was putting in all the hard work and running the supply of cocaine in the King's Cross area, but ultimately all the profits were going back to Danny.
Danny Karam had Michael Kanaan and the other lads collecting money for him, and he was going to give them a certain amount of it, and he said was to bank the rest and keep it for them. But in fact, Danny was grabbing the lion's share, and poor old Michael and others were doing all his dirty work for him.
Michael Kanaan is becoming increasingly violent. Just a few months earlier, he and a number of fellow DK's boys were involved in a street fight in King's Cross. According to Rossini, after fleeing the scene when the police arrived, Kanaan produced a bloody knife and admitted to stabbing 2 men during the brawl.
The group considered they owned King's Cross, and if you wanted to sell drugs in King's Cross, you were seen either as an opposition and you were dealt with violently, or alternately you paid them rent, much the same way as if you would rent a stall at a market. If you wanted to work in that area, you had to pay them the cash. If you didn't pay them the cash, you'd get violence in return.
There were vast rewards for people who got on top. Therefore, you had to fight for it. Bam, bam, bam. They shot each other, fought each other to get on top, get the ascendancy, and get the rewards.
Like these people were getting around. One was very quick to draw the gun and resolve any issue or threat to him or his mates, but it was not in proportion to what was going on. And that was the thing with Kanaan. Everything was sort of out of whack.
I don't know what went wrong with Michael. Like, he certainly had the potential. He could have done many things with his life, but something's triggered with him, and he's gone for the gangster lifestyle. You know, I've been able to see you know, reports from psychologists in relation to Michael. He can't even explain it himself.
I don't think he was pure evil. He's just a young thug. And it's just, I mean, you talk about the mafia in the United States, and the young toughs come out, and they'll maybe Sicilian background, maybe not, and they'll decide to set themselves up in business as a gangster. There's nothing evil about it, they just decided to go that way. This fellow, Michael Kanaan, decided to go that way.
Mate, you get your 50 bucks.
And inadvertently, two innocent young men are about to fall victim to Kanaan's chosen way, and their families will be left heartbroken.
So guys, what are we going to do tonight? Have a good time?
Yeah, bro. I've got some bitches lined up, and then...
On the night of July 17th, 1998, Michael Kanaan, Alan Rossini and three other men drive to Cafe Extreme in the inner western Sydney suburb of Five Dock to intimidate and threaten a man about his activities in rebirthing cars.
Something around 5 Dock?
Just going to chill out tonight, boys, you know, don't do anything stupid.
The group was involved in, in rebirthing of vehicles. Back then, the vehicle of choice for the gang was a Subaru WRX, and there was a lot of rebirthing in relation to those vehicles through associates of the gang.
Hey, Mick, you packing heat or what?
Yeah, maybe I am, eh?
According to Rossini, when they leave the cafe, Kanaan is sitting in the back seat on the driver's side and is carrying a snub-nosed revolver, a .22 caliber with red elastic bands wrapped around the handle.
That the real thing? Yeah, it's the real thing. It's not from the $2 shop, it's for real. That's the shit, man, that's the shit.
They travel along the Great Northern Road towards the Five Dock Hotel.
Funny bastard.
Two friends drinking at the pub, Michael Hurl and Ronald Singleton, have had a disagreement over money, and the argument spills out onto the footpath.
Jesus, it's 50 bucks.
Yeah, we'll
Pay
just
me my bloody
just
money.
hang out,
Right,
bro.
I'm sick of this.
Michael, I'll get you next
this
week.
bloke got paid.
Singleton
Yeah,
owed Michael some money, and he wasn't paying it back. And he didn't look like paying it back, so Michael said, well, that's it. I said, I'm going to get a bit of blood.
Right, mate, I don't have it. I'll drop you so quick, mate.
Another friend, Adam Wright, tries to mediate.
Wipe that smile off your face. Start, mate. 50 bucks.
That night there was, I think it was one of the boys' birthdays, and I could not even tell you whose birthday it was. They were just a group of them up there having a drink and nothing else. Just supposed to be a bit of a fun night with a group of boys.
Don't start me, all right? Jesus! Next week it's yours.
Meanwhile, the traffic lights at the intersection adjacent to the hotel turn red, and the vehicle that DK's boys are travelling in stops.
Come on, fellas. Push on. Put your bloody head in, you block. Get off there. Come on, bring her up. Come on. Come on, mate. Get with you. Hey, get off it. Get off.
Michael Kanaan shoots Michael Hurl at close range, striking him in the left side of the chest. Ronald Singleton is shot in the right arm, although he's unaware that he's been hit. Adam Wright is shot in the lower abdomen.
Hey, heads up, tough guy. Go now.
Kanaan makes another attempt to shoot Ronald Singleton as they drive off, but the gun is empty. Michael Hurl and Adam Wright are left fighting for their lives.
Well, he was shot, and there was a lot of blood, and he passed out. And I think some young woman from the pub ran to his assistance and sort of cradled him until the ambulance got there. Of course, it was all over in 30 seconds.
Come on, let's go. Go, get out, go.
What I've been told, Adam got inside the pub. He walked in the pub and said, "I've been shot," and just dropped down.
The attack was unprovoked. 4 men in a car pulled up, there was a fight and shots were fired.
And I got a phone call off my daughter, and she was at the hospital. And that's when they said, cross your fingers, cross your toes. It's that bad.
It severed an artery and he was bleeding to death. By the time we got to the hospital, we were told he was going to lose his right leg. The right leg was dying because of the blood that he'd lost. And you think to yourself, yeah, okay, it's only a leg, we'll deal with it. And you sit there thinking of all these things that you can do, and each time they came back to us, the story just got worse and worse. The percentage of his survival was going down.
Ultimately, the wounds inflicted upon both Michael Hurl and Adam Wright are so serious that even a fit, healthy young footballer wouldn't survive.
Some bullets, they go inside you, and once they hit there, they bounce everywhere and they rip everything on their inside.
There was nothing they could do to save him. And it was one bullet. One bullet did a lot of damage. Adam just wanted to get on with his life. He loved life. He loved playing football. He loved his mates. He loved his family. He wasn't perfect by any means, but he was a beautiful person in the way he thought about things, very caring with certain people. He had friends from all walks of life.
Oh, he was happy-go-lucky, easy to get along with, very popular. You know, could have done a lot of things, but his life was cut too short.
It was a cold-blooded killing. It was uncalled for. It was callous, reckless, and wanton.
The night after the murders, Michael Kanaan and Alan Rossini burn the clothes they were wearing and leave Sydney. The car they're driving is degreased and dumped. Kanaan tells Rossini that he threw the gun into the Cooks River. It is never recovered.
Following the shootings at Five Dock, a strike force was formed. It investigated various facets of what had happened. Obviously, a vehicle had been sighted. That vehicle was subsequently reported stolen and had been treated in such a way that any latent fingerprints in the vehicle had been removed. Investigations obviously concentrated on connections to that vehicle, and the fact that a telephone had been found at the scene which gave vital information as to who was connected to the vehicle that night.
I think in relation to why Mick Kanaan reacted violently, the only person who can really answer that is Mick. No one can explain it, even the guys who are closest to him.
Well, he got described by the police as psychopathic, and he sort of just snapped like that, you know.
The tribute that was paid to him through his funeral, I was amazed at the amount of people that were there. We had everybody, like footballers, and I'm talking big name footballers, high profile people, down to neighbours and young children. His young football side that he was coaching, they formed a guard of honour outside the church. They were under 8s. And these little kids had probably never ever been to a funeral and didn't even know what they were going to, but it was just such a beautiful tribute to him. And I think that speaks what people thought of him.
Bon's a kid, great footballer, good worker, hard worker. You know, he was the apple of my eye. You know, just, you know, like, he was not the perfect son, but, you know, what all fathers, you know, we really want this son to turn out to be. And he was going all right. Doing his best anyway.
I've lost my eldest son. My husband and I have lost our eldest son. My other children have lost a brother that they looked up to, a mate that they looked up to. It just took a hunk out of your life.
Hey, get off it! Get off!
When the television program Australia's Most Wanted schedules a segment on associated Middle Eastern crime, Michael Kanaan is concerned that somebody might be able to implicate him.
Go now!
According to Rossini, Kanaan and fellow gang members shoot the green power box and nearby power lines at the electricity substation in the southwestern suburb of Wiley Park. They hope to cause a local blackout as the episode goes to air.
They had access to multiple firearms. They had military assault rifles, they had shotguns, they had semi-automatic pistols, and even firearms that I'd never seen before.
Meanwhile, Michael Kanaan negotiates the sale of a sports car through New Image Smash Repairs at Yennora, but the deal fails to materialise. According to Rossini, Kanaan is extremely unhappy with the outcome and plans a drive-by shooting in retaliation. On August 26, 1998, Kanaan, Rossini, and two others open fire on the business, using shotguns, taking aim at windows and vehicles.
The group was so quick to violence, it was breathtaking. They seemed to want to resolve any issue that confronted them primarily by going for the gun first, or bashing, or stabbing. Really, it's a wonder more people weren't killed.
A week later, Kanaan is told that one of his drug runners had been harassed by members from a rival gang. He plans to kneecap them in revenge, but they can't be located. On September 11th, 1998, Kanaan receives a phone call to say that one of the men in question is at the EP1 nightclub here in King's Cross.
The way it happened was 2 or 3 carloads of men turned up outside the front of the nightclub, took out various types of weapons, including shotguns, semi-automatic pistols and high-powered rifles, and basically sprayed the facade of the nightclub with gunfire, and then fled before police arrived. Ballistics examinations of cartridges found at the scene would later link those weapons to other violent crime.
It was a plan they formed in their safe house at Paddington, and just multiple shots had just been fired into the door of the club, again trying to terrorise other players in King's Cross.
There was a very clear message being sent to the rival group that we're ready and we're prepared to take you on head on.
On October 13th, 1998, in the suburb of Greenacre, Kanaan confronts a man named Les Elias about a dispute over a gun. He's challenged by Elias and reacts by shooting him at least 3 times in the legs.
Michael Kanaan was very quick to respond to any threat to his name, his character, or any physical threat upon him with violence. Very quick to draw the gun, and in one particular occasion, a person questioned, "Who's Michael Kanaan?" His response was, "Well, this is who Michael Kanaan is," and he immediately drew a weapon and shot the person.
I don't know what you'd describe him as. I think he has major problems with himself. I don't know whether it's... I don't understand some of the terminology that they put towards people that have these egos that they think they can beat the system.
On October 17th, 1998, Edward Lee, a 14-year-old high school student, and 4 of his friends are on their way to a birthday party in Tilapia Street Punch Bowl, a well-known, mostly Middle Eastern-operated drug trading strip in Sydney's southwest. They're harassed by a large group of locals and a brawl erupts. One of the Tilapia Street residents, Mustafa Dib, fetches a knife from his home and kills Edward Lee, stabbing him in the back and chest.
He was a young man just out going to a friend's place for a party. It was a tragic set of circumstances. I clearly recall his mother going on TV, obviously grieving for the loss of a son in such really a wanton fashion.
Police then went to investigate it and went to, it might have been 100 people saw the incident and not a single person came forward. And the problem was, of course, that once you come forward and you're identified, well, you're dead.
Later we found out that the offender had met with Kanaan and other men at Bondi Beach to discuss what had happened, and at Kanaan's insistence, that person and others then travelled to Queensland and set up an alibi, thereby trying to excuse them from being in Sydney at the time of the murder.
Less than a fortnight later, Michael Kanaan seeks further retribution after 2 Middle Eastern men are jumped and bashed by a large group of Aborigines in Lithgow Jail. Despite Danny Karam's opposition to the idea, on November 11th, 1998, Kanaan allegedly arranges a drive-by shooting in Everleigh Street, a largely Aboriginal area in Redfern, on the outskirts of central Sydney. According to Rossini, Kanaan and as many as 4 others discharged 13 rounds of ammunition into 2 houses and cars as they travel in a stolen 4-wheel drive.
Of course, the Aboriginal people hid under beds and tried to escape. No one was injured, but they left a message: you do so and so to our boys and we'll inside and we'll get you outside. It was just a law unto themselves, and as though the Aboriginal people in the block had anything to do with the inmates in Lithgow prison. People in the block have got enough problems of their own without having the sins of their brothers visited upon them like that. But it was just a case of demonstrating that they're above the law and nobody can touch them.
An Aboriginal flag is dropped from the car with an obscene message and the words "blood for blood" written on it. Michael Kanaan then squares up with 2 former street runners who disappeared a few months earlier. One has a mobile phone number, which he claims to have forgotten, tattooed on his forearm, while the other, who owes money, is kneecapped.
That happened. He was kidnapped. He was taken to a premises where he was beaten and pistol whipped. He was stabbed. He was burnt with cigarettes, cut with a knife, and then for the final main course he was shot in the legs and then taken out and dumped.
Remarkably, the young man survives the ordeal. But when Michael Kanaan next points his weapon, it will be with far deadlier consequences. 5 months have passed since Michael Kanaan killed Adam Wright and Michael Hurl outside the 5 Dock Hotel. Kanaan's lust for power and his murderous rage heighten as his relationship with Danny Karam wanes.
Danny Karam was a man who had a quick temper, and the temper was normally attended by violence. And although he was in charge of this organisation, he really treated his lieutenants quite poorly. He paid them poorly, and if he thought that he was being gypped for money or that they weren't working hard enough, he would either threaten them or pay them even less. This led to a level of unrest in the group, particularly with Michael Kanaan.
When profits started to go down, Danny started standing over them and smashing them up and threatening them.
It's been 7 months since Kanaan first suggested killing Karam, and it's now a daily topic of conversation. Karam argues with Kanaan over his cannabis abuse, and Kanaan is eager to take over the drug business and receive a larger slice of the profits. Kanaan is also becoming increasingly paranoid that Karam might give him up to the police over the 5 Dock murders.
Michael started to share his thoughts with the other lieutenants and quickly gained a level of support amongst most of them that Danny Karam should go.
They initially had inspired to have him stick himself with a hot shot of heroin, Danny being a heroin addict, but he didn't for some reason take it, so they decided they were going to kill him.
On December 13th, 1998, Danny Karam arrives at the Surrey Hills apartment in Riley Street to pick up 2 guns. He's buzzed in by Alan Rossini.
He was about to enter the premises. Kanaan and 2 others left via a back door to wait in ambush for him outside. Karam stayed in the premises for a short time and then departed the premises, at which time one of the people in the premises rang those outside and said Danny's on his way.
Meanwhile, Will Dodolius is leaving a friend's house on his way to see a movie in nearby Paddington. His car is parked approximately 60 metres away.
So as I got into my car, I noticed, since it was a dark street, the only light was coming from the RAV4 because the lights were on and the rear brake lights were on, so it was sort of lit up in that corner.
G'day boys, Danny. Now!
And as I got into the car, about to start the engine, then I heard a number of shots go off and a bunch of men scurrying around the car.
Now! All right, let's split. See you later, Danny boy.
My initial reaction was just to get out of there as quick as I can because I already had started the car and the street was very quiet. And you could hear a pin drop that evening, and I thought that, you know, being in a white car, a loud engine, when I just started the car, I would attract attention. So my goal was to get out of there as quickly as possible.
A total of 22 shots are fired from 3 different weapons. Karam receives 16 gunshot wounds in the chest and lower body and dies almost instantly. Michael Kanaan boasts about the killing. He tells Alan Rossini that after he finished shooting Karam, he went back and shot him again.
We located the address for the safe house, which was adjacent to the murder site. A search warrant was executed on those premises and evidence was obtained from there. Certain witnesses were pursued that we knew had attended the premises through other forensic evidence which had become available. But we kept on meeting this, this brick wall, this wall of silence.
We thought there was firecrackers, and it wasn't. It was gunshots.
This morning, heavily armed police stormed Karam's flat in a block of units next to where he was killed.
I can accept that a lot of people were frightened of what may happen to them if they assisted the police, because if someone was willing to kill Danny Karam, then anyone else was just a mere stepping stone.
At that point, Kanaan seemed to think he was Billy the Kid. He could just go shoot anyone and get away with it. Well, of course you can't, and anyone could say that, could see that Kanaan was heading for a fall. He was going to be caught. He'd lost control of himself.
The core group of DK's boys are absent from the funeral. That upsets Karam's family and raises suspicion about their involvement in the murder.
Following the murder of Danny Karam, Michael Kanaan assumed control of the DK's boys. As a group, they would operate, and they continue to operate, dealing in drugs in King's Cross. But following the murder of Karam too, they in turn were put under pressure because everyone thought that they had committed that crime. And that led them to hatch another plot to throw police and other crime groups off their scent for that.
Michael Kanaan suggests killing the underworld figure Tongan Sam, who works for the Ibrahim family. He believes this will shift the suspicion of blame for Karam's death by making it look like a retaliatory hit. The others are less than enthusiastic about the plan, but Kanaan is adamant, and the search for Tongan Sam begins.
Right, so if we kill Tongan Sam, it will get the cops off our asses, right?
Let's just finish him off once and for all. Let's just finish him, bro.
On December 22nd, 1998, they scour King's Cross and the nearby suburbs without success for a third consecutive night.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. It's got to be here, keep going.
Hey, get your head down, get your head down.
Oh shit, cops, go.
Shit, go, hit it, go.
Get us out of here, go!
At just after 3 a.m. the following morning, two policemen in a marked car attempt to pull over the vehicle that Kanaan and three companions are travelling in.
Shit, they're behind us!
Go, man!
The men are pursued to a dead end at the White City Tennis Club on Alma Street in Paddington, where they abandon the vehicle. Kanaan and the driver are chased by Constable Petresh. Alan Rossini sprints off in a different direction. The fourth man is apprehended by Constable Fotopoulos. Rossini searches for his gun, but he escapes without locating it. The driver also gets away. Kanaan stops, turns, and raises his gun at Constable Petresh. He shoots the officer in the right wrist and leg. Kanaan then exchanges fire with Constable Fotopoulos and is wounded several times in the process.
Drop the gun now! Don't move!
Ironically, at one point, Kanaan literally shoots himself in the foot.
Don't move! Don't move!
The person that was wrestled to the ground was found to be carrying a magazine from a semi-automatic pistol, and two other firearms were found nearby, obviously having been discarded by the occupants of the vehicle. And some of those weapons were ballistically linked to the murder of Danny Karam and other shootings.
Mick Kanaan didn't have to shoot. He had the opportunity. He could have run. He could have fled. He could have dumped his guns. He could have done many other things. But what he did was absolute cowardice. We had a police officer that was climbing a chain mesh fence, and he was stuck. He was like a spider in a web. He had nowhere to go. Mick's turned around and then started firing shots into him. It was just absolute cowardice.
It was a bloody gun battle in Sydney's exclusive east, only ending after 25 rounds had been fired and 3 men lay wounded, one of them a police officer.
Kanaan was arrested at the scene, conveyed to St Vincent's Hospital, where he was kept under police guard.
He is charged with intent to murder and other firearms offences.
The two constables involved in this incident, Rushcutters Bay, acted bravely and admirably. to basically pursue people in the darkness, and then having been fired upon and respond to that fire was very credible on their part.
Michael Kanaan's injuries will leave him in a wheelchair for the next 3 years, but amazingly, he is essentially a free man. During the first 5 months of 1999, Michael Kanaan is out on bail awaiting trial, but remains in frequent contact with the major players from his drug ring. During this time, police mount a surveillance operation on their activities.
I kind of applied it to the strategy that the Americans used against Al Capone when they got him for taxation offences. They couldn't get him for what he was ultimately up to with bootlegging, but they got him for what they could, and that was our strategy with Mick Kanaan and his gang. Get them for what they could and just see what comes out of that.
By concentrating on that business, we were able to gain a brief of evidence on Kanaan and the other lieutenants in DK's boys, in which we were able to put a serious drug conspiracy charge on them, and an operation was then undertaken to arrest all those people.
150 police swooped on homes across Sydney's southwest early this morning. 9 people arrested for a string of violent crimes over the past year.
When Strikeforce Lancer moved to arrest the principals of DK's boys for their drug distribution business, a large operation was put in place, involved about 200 police across various premises in the Sydney area. A number of these people were arrested without incident. However, when the search warrant was about to be executed on the Kanaan premises at Belfield, Michael, who was inside with some of his family and associates, barricaded themselves inside the building and virtually created a siege situation. That siege went on for about 30 hours before he finally surrendered to police.
On June 2nd, 1999, Michael Kanaan, Alan Rossini, Rabia Mawas, Wassim El Assad and Peter Laycock are arrested and charged with conspiracy to supply a commercial quantity of cocaine.
That offence was quite significant. It carried a life sentence, and certainly as a result of a number of persons realising the position they were in, we got some witnesses out of that.
In return for full immunity, Peter Laycock and Alan Rossini agree to actively cooperate in criminal proceedings against a number of fellow gang members, predominantly Michael Kanaan.
The evidence of the witnesses or the people involved in DK's boys who subsequently gave evidence was absolutely pivotal and essential to the prosecution, and gave a lot of credence to the brief of evidence. To have information or evidence coming from someone who was at the scene of a lot of these crimes but not directly involved in pulling the trigger was very strong and very cogent evidence.
Using them as witnesses was the only way that we would have got the murder convictions that we've got.
On September 17th, 1999, Kanaan, already in custody, is arrested for the murders of Michael Hurl, Adam Wright and Danny Karam. But on November 29th, there's a controversial twist in the proceedings. Magistrate Pat O'Shane discharges him from standing trial for the attempted murders of Constables Patresh and Fotopoulos. She says there is not a shred of evidence which gives rise to any factual or reasonable cause on the part of the police to chase these young fellows on this particular night, effectively rendering the arrest unlawful. It was a devastating ruling, especially for Constable Fotopoulos, whose urine sample from that night returned a positive test to marijuana. Although he admits smoking it 3 months earlier, a police pharmacologist testifies that the traces were so tiny that it could have been from environmental exposure and could not have impaired his faculties. Meanwhile, the Director of Public Prosecutions uses its power to indict Kanaan in spite of the magistrate's conclusion.
They had no idea what they were dealing with that night. They had a vehicle which was acting, the occupants in the vehicle acting in a very suspicious fashion. If they'd just been driving normally, no attraction would have been made, and therefore the incident wouldn't have happened.
These four rotters were out doing out after mischief, out after trouble, and someone had to notice them, and who better to notice them than the police and question them as to who they are.
How about I show you, kid?
Kanaan's initial trial for the 5-dock shooting is aborted, but on July 8, 2001, he's found guilty and later sentenced to 2 life terms for the murder of Michael Hurl and Adam Wright. He also receives 25 years for the malicious wounding of Ronald Singleton.
I never understood why they never put him on the stand, because if he was proclaiming his innocence, he never got up and defended himself. There were stories in the court case of how he was never there. He had people get up on the stand and lie. To me, if you knew you weren't there and you had witnesses, you would bring them forward at the committal hearing, not at the trial. He never did that.
Oh, I got a feeling. I knew he was as guilty as sin because he couldn't look me in the eye. And it's just a feeling that you sense yourself.
The general public reaction to the murders at 5-Dock was one of abhorrence. It was just a wanton killing. What it was an altercation, a private altercation that had been impinged by these people who weren't involved, and from a simple argument on the footpath, that it escalated into the shooting of 3 people, resulting in the death of 2. It was quite clearly unbelievable.
On June the 6th, 2002, Kanaan and his co-conspirators are found guilty of Danny Karam's murder. Kanaan is sentenced to a 3rd life sentence without parole. On December 18th, 2002, Kanaan receives a further 3 years and 4 months imprisonment for being an accessory after the fact to Edward Lee's death. The following October, he appears in the district court in relation to the Everleigh Street shooting, but the case is not pursued thereafter. Just over 2 years later, Kanaan appeals the convictions and sentences from the 5-Dock and Danny Karam murders. They're both dismissed. But in 2006, Kanaan is found guilty of malicious wounding with intent as a result of the White City incident, and is sentenced to a further 12 years jail, providing belated vindication for Constables Fotopoulos and Petresh. The following February, Kanaan is convicted for the shooting of Les Elias. In sentencing him to 10 years in prison, Judge Stephen Norrish describes Kanaan as a dangerous man and compares the incident to a scene from Goodfellas.
In the late 1990s, I can say that Michael Kanaan was probably the worst problem that the New South Wales Police would have had at that time. And if it ultimately wasn't for his shooting at the White City tennis courts and his later arrest for these and other matters, God only knows how many people would have been killed.
My view is that Michael Kanaan was a sociopath. He showed no remorse for what he did. He wanted to resolve every issue that seemed to confront him with violence or firearms. And a lot more bodies would be on the street if he hadn't been locked away.
Michael Kanaan is currently in Goulburn's Supermax jail in southern New South Wales, alongside such criminals as Ivan Milat, John Travis, Seth Gonzalez and Leslie Camilleri. He has now exhausted all avenues of appeal and will die in custody.